Hi, David.
Well, hello. I just have to begin by saying feel so privileged to be able to talk to the two of you. I can't tell you how much time I have been in the maps that you have put together over since February. The short story is that we live off of Nessel Road on what is the Gilbert's Drift, not far from the Elgin Country Club, which is in a Kamic system. And my granddaughter, who lives with us, goes to school on the Marengo Moraine right by Central High School, which is Burlington Central. And at least once a week, I have to go from the Gilbert's Drift to the top of the Marengo Moraine because it's at the highest point. That school is right by that tower there. And I've been fascinated for the past 4 or 5 years about that journey, because I go, I'm driving through something here. I don't know what I'm driving through, but I'm driving through something here. And so I finally pulled up those maps and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? I guess my initial question for you too is, how did you make this map? It is incredibly detailed. It's not like you're testing every square foot of Kane County. How do you make a map like this?
Well, there's a couple steps we go through, kind of typically. The first step is to look at the soils map. I don't know what we call them now, the National Natural Resources people, NRCS. So they go out and pick a lot of holes. So we know from their mapping what the upper 4 to 5 feet, what the geology is like by interpreting what they've done. And then based on landforms, like you just mentioned, cames, and there's moraines and all kinds of different landforms, then we can interpret what's going on further in the subsurface. And then we amend that with our own borings, where we take cores and look at the sediments. And then there's also a big database of existing information from engineering firms who have taken borings. And then water wells are supposed to have logs of what was encountered when they put the water well in. So there's a whole bunch of different resources that we use. And then for mapping, we use air photos and more recently LiDAR. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, I'll just add in, the LiDAR is something that really gives us a lot more detail on the landforms, which, the accuracy is only as good as our model is. And sometimes, if you see a sand dune or a river valley, you can probably map up that line really well. And other times our lines may not be as accurate, but they look good, and most of the times they're pretty good, but they're not always perfect. So you might find something that you might find the line might be off by 100 meters or a quarter mile in a rare case, but they're mostly pretty good.
Yeah. I was actually quite amazed because in the process of making my PowerPoint for the Kane County Certified Naturalist presentation I'm doing in October, I did a lot of layering of maps on top of each other so they could see where your map looked as compared to the forest preserve map, for instance, or compared to the watershed maps, for instance. And it really was quite amazing how well they lined up. I was shocked by that. Of course, I used mostly the roads to help me to do that, but they weren't that far off.
Are you using the quadrangle maps, the 1 to 20,
yes,
or the county
maps,
or the county merged map?
Well, I know you've got a wonderful map for one of the quadrangles. I think it's Pingree quadrangle, David. But I'd be using the one that the three of you done with the Allison.
You're using the big one of the whole county, yeah.
Yep. Oh, that's where you got Allison's name. Okay.
Yeah, because she was on the top of the map. So
she helped put it together. Sure.
She did respond, actually, thinking that she might be able to pop in. So we'll see if she can or not. Who has the naming rights for this Glacial Lake Pingree? Did you come up with that? Was it their prior to that point at some place?
I think that one has precedence. It was named by an earlier
I can see this in here.
geologist. I'm pretty sure it was, but
Yeah, it was
it's
named.
not Wilmot and Fry. It could have been Leighton or.
It's in this. Well, I got to turn my blurring. I should
Yeah,
turn my,
now, and we get to see your office. I should do the same, just to be fair.
this is in this book. It's in this book. I just checked.
Okay.
73, and they can probably say where it came from. It's on this one right here. It says Pingree.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. In 1970, but it could have gone back to even, I can't remember if it goes back to like that Leighton and Power stuff or not, but
I think it does. So yeah, if you were like in the good old days when precedence meant something, and you wanted to find the first person who used that name, it might go back to like 1940.
Here it is. Okay, here it says right here, Lake. It's because they have a lot of history in this book. It's like a little Bible for quaternary, right? Named for Pingree Grove, Kane County. Surprise, surprise. By Leighton, McClintock, and Powers in manuscript. So it's probably that. It was probably in that like 1920s manuscript that we saw, Brandon, in the library that they never published.
Wow.
So you could tell people it was named maybe like what, almost 100 years ago, probably 90 to 95 years ago.
In your map, it says the depths of the lake sediment in some places are 25 feet deep, something like that in Glacial Lake Pingree.
Yeah, I have to go back. I have to pull my map. Let me pull my map up. I haven't looked at it for a long time.
I'm pretty sure that's true, Dave, because I did some coring in the southern Hunt Lake Quad, and it captures the northern end of Glacial Lake Pingree.
My recollection this is a long recollection ago, but there might have been some cores from Dave Gross that were in the lake.
Probably, yeah, but he only went so deep.
I don't think I personally drilled a hole in the middle of the lake, but it was based on, like Brandon said, all that data that we compiled from engineering and previous geologists and so forth. I'd have to go through my Pingree Grove files to.
Well, that's what we can determine with our new drilling.
But could the lake have filled that capacity that you show with the lake deposits and the ice wall deposits at one time? I mean, could it have been that large at one time?
Well, when you look at the LiDAR, it suggests that it was piecemeal. There almost has to have been some ice damming the lake, especially to the south and to the north, and then off to the east as well. And you've got the Marengo Moraine damming it on the west. That's a pretty efficient dam.
Yeah.
But, everywhere else, you look at the LiDAR and it does look like a bunch of lake plains, but they're at different elevations. So it looks like ice wall lakes that drained at different times, and maybe a late stage lake that was an amalgamation of a bunch of these things. It's no doubt very complex.
Is it fair to say that the drainage into the Fox River Valley was delayed until the glaciers had receded past the Gilbert's Drift, and in fact, then the Kishwaukee River Basin and the area of drainage by Lily Lake to the south there was the primary outflow for that glacial lake?
It could have been, but I have a feeling it was just one gigantic swamp.
Yeah.
Drainage, it probably did drain, but it wasn't like there was a Niagara Falls thing going on or anything like that. It was just a slow, lazy river somewhere that drained it.
Well, it is kind of interesting because you can go at Route 47 just north of Lily Lake, and you actually dip down and come back up, and is evident as having some kind of movement through there, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. That's the boundary between the Arlington Moraine and the Marengo Moraine. I think that's what you're talking about, Dave. So that's where 47 crosses 64.
Yeah, north of there, just north of there.
Yeah, and then Lily Lake is north of that. So in that area, that's yeah, it could have drained through that area, and then that little tiny creek was the outflow, but that's not a very big creek. What is
Which
Pearson
quadrangle is that in?
Creek,
Is that?
who's that?
That might be the Elburn Quadrangle. I'm
Yeah,
not
that sounds familiar. Yeah, because it's not in Lily Lake. Is not in Pingree Grove, but it's yeah.
Let me pull up, actually, if you don't mind. I'll share my screen here for a little bit.
That is a nice looking map.
It's a gorgeous map.
It's nice with the DM on there.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. So you see this area here, and what's really interesting is that north of Virgil, here, I'm not going to go into presentation mode, so I can move this around a little bit more. But right here is the newest forest preserve park, and it's undeveloped. And I was trying to tell the education manager about this, because they always know that I come up with these crazy ideas that I'm going to talk to people about, that I go down a rabbit hole and then I go crazy about it. And I said, did you know there's there could have been a huge lake. It took up the upper fifth of our county. And I talked about its outflow into this area. And she says, well, that explains why the water table in this forest preserve is so high to this day.
Yeah,
which is kind of an interesting phenomena. Could let that forest preserve tell the story of this whole Glacial Lake Pingree and the moraines around it and all that kind of stuff, because I think it's a pretty significant story. You've got all these watersheds.
Is there a name for that lake, Brendan? That lake where he's talking about? Does that have a name?
That doesn't have a name, no.
Because that area looks like almost bigger than Glacial Lake Pingree.
Yeah, it definitely was an outflow area into the Kishwaukee to the north watershed.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it would have ever had the depth that would have been involved, because I don't think you would have had everything's downhill from that outflow area to the south. Yeah,
there's some that area. Let's see where your pointer is right now is where thanks to some leads I was given by professors at Northern Illinois, the light purple things are Ice Wall Lake Plains.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the birth of them. That was the first map where I identified them. And where your pointer was just at is if you go north of where you are now, just south of that one right there, that big light purple thing, and there's an orange dot in the middle, near the middle. And it looks like it says 35,527.
Yep.
At that dot, that's where I put in one of our power probe holes. Goes down about 20 feet, and near the bottom are all these really cool fossils. Dryas integrifolia, which is a tundra plant, and cold climate ostracods, which are critters that live in lakes. That was the first core where I found all that kind of crap. And you radiocarbon date them, and it gives you an upper bound for the age of those deposits.
Wow.
So we've been doing dating of these kinds of deposits elsewhere, and it's been working out really well. And that's kind of the model that I wanted to do with the new mapping. That whole area over there, the west side of the Moraine Moraine, is really kind of a complex of Ice Wall Lake Plains. And then the dark purple part is where, after there was the overflow, established, whatever that, I don't think that's the Kishwaukee River, but it's a tributary.
Yes, it is. This is all part of the Kishwaukee watershed.
Yeah,
South Kishwaukee.
It all cut into that glacial sediment and established a new base level. And there's a whole set of other lakes, and that's what the dark purple is. And so that's probably what's going on to a certain extent in Glacial Lake Pingree, that area where there's ice wall lakes dotting the landscape, and that's like an early stage thing. And then drainage gets established, and then you get a lower lake level, basically. And I think Glacial Lake Pingree is a little more complicated because there's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more levels to it. It's higher in elevation to the south, and lower in elevation to the north. And then this one on the other side, where this unnamed lake, the dark purple between the big splotches of Ice Wall Lake Plain, that's an individual lake, I know.
Mm.
So it's,
I mean, for Glacial Lake Pingree, I always imagine that, you know, as the ice retreated back, that's a north-south moraine, as the ice retreated back to the east, you had water, you know, and that lighter blue till was being deposited, and the orange cames and so forth. You had water punting there between the ice and that really tall moraine until it broke through. Like you said, there were low spots where it broke through, and that must have been, you know, when the lake began to drain, and then as the ice receded back and allowed for channels to drain southward or whichever direction to the east.
Yeah, you've got Tyler Creek, you've got the the Ficciata Creek system, then you've got the Fearson Creek system. You've got three separate watersheds that are draining from each a third of this lake into the Fox River.
So I mean, you can imagine that you had ice at a high level when ice was right there. It was bounded by the east by the glacier front, and by the west by the moraine. And that's why you have the lake there, you know, because you have that moraine blocking the drainage to the west. And so that's probably why you have different levels as the ice was melted downwards or moved back, whatever happened, you would have had different outlets that opened up and different levels of the lake. Just like we know for Lake Agassiz was a big lake, they know, you know, there are all these complicated histories to these lakes where it drained one way and then the other way, and maybe the ice re-advanced again. And Brandon knows that history better than I do. You know, I don't know how long the ice was there. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of years, Brandon, was the ice there with the lake present. I don't know, but
yeah, relatively speaking, in geologic time, it's all happening pretty rapidly, and lots of sediment is being deposited all at once. You know, this landscape has been sitting around for 20,000 years, 25,000 years, something like that. And then all this stuff that's going on is probably taking place in 1,000 or 2,000 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
The ice is melting back.
Yeah, I was just looking at Illwater, some of the data. I can't find the Dave Gross cores in there, but you know, there might be a couple places 25 feet thick, but in a lot of areas it might only be, you know, 5, 10, 15 feet thick over something else. And, you know, that doesn't require a lot of time, but it's definitely some centuries there.
Just out of curiosity's sake, and this is probably an unanswerable question, where do you think the deep end was? Any thought where it would have been deepest?
We don't. It's covered, so we don't know. The lake sediment has buried that surface.